In the latest expose from Project Veritas, we see that they have successfully infiltrated a far-left extremist organization. And on the surface, you could actually argue there's not much to see here. No, they are actually extremists, and I'm going to break it down for you. Project Veritas went to a group called the Base, Anarchist Political Center, where they saw people training for combat, to engage in violence. The first thing I want to say before we read this is there's absolutely nothing illegal about individuals with opinions, even bad ones, and individuals who do combat and self-defense training. That in and of itself is nothing. Then when you combine this with the overt ideology and the explicit support they give for extremism, you then put them in a very, very obvious camp. And what we've heard so far, so you got to understand, with what Trump has said about, deeming Antifa terrorists, doesn't mean they're going to show up to the base headquarters and arrest anybody. It doesn't mean anybody there has done anything illegal. In fact, they haven't, at least from what I can see in this video. But if these people engage in overt acts of violence, these things will likely be taken into consideration when charges are brought. Much like hate crimes, if you go and punch somebody, assault and battery. If you go and yell a slur and punch somebody, assault, battery, hate crime charge. You see how this works? Let's read the story. Veritas says breaking New York Antifa members train for violence. Quote, so if that doesn't knock them out, poke the eyes. Absolutely. Interesting. They say, in a second video installment, Project Veritas today released footage exposing the violent nature of the New York-based Antifa chapter. Our second expose Antifa installment demonstrates just how far the group will go to engage in physical combat, evade arrests, and promote the most damage possible on the streets, said James O'Keefe, CEO and founder of Veritas. Here are a few statements from Antifa members in our latest videos. One instructor says, if you get a good liver or kidney shot, it's pretty much crippling them. They're going to be doubled over in a lot of pain. If you break one of the floating ribs, which are small and right down here, those are also very painful. It's hard to move after that, to catch a breath. So one good body shot could potentially give you all the time in the world to run away while they're doubled over in pain. Or really put a beating on them after that if you really want to make it personal. First of all, that is where it crosses the line. If he stopped and just said that would give you time to get away, it'd probably be fine. But what they're talking about doing is inflicting physical damage for no other reason than emotional satisfaction. That's where it gets over the top. Here's another quote. We just kind of wanted to, in this space, reframe the idea of self-defense as not simply you're being acted upon by an aggressor, but it's kind of a decision you make to fight back. In a lot of ways to say, I am human and I occupy this space and I will not be effed with. They're basically saying, call it self-defense when you start the fight. Legally, it doesn't work. You can see why this ideology is dangerous. He also said, yeah. So if that doesn't knock them out, then yeah, the nose, the eyes, poke the eyes, absolutely. Quote, we call this a safe space to practice aggression, not aggression against one another, but really just a space that if you want to, or if you want to challenge yourself to kind of work on harnessing that kind of energy. Attorney General William Barr said Thursday, there are extremist agitators who are hijacking the protests to pursue their own separate and violent agenda. Our latest video further proves how structured Antifa is. It is an international organization with sophisticated admission requirements and paramilitary physical training. Project Veritas will continue to expose them, yada, yada. Okay, here's the first and most important thing. Antifa uses the disorganized they say they're disorganized as a principal tactic of what they are and what they do. They will tell you there's no official Antifa because they're trying to evade law enforcement. This may work on unsuspecting regular people who then mindlessly parrot their propaganda, but I assure you a prosecutor would easily build a case against Antifa. They have a flag, they have a tattoo, they have international cells, they operate independently, but they coordinate with each other and they exchange funds and training. It is not hard to see where this goes. It's how gangs work. It's how the mob works. It's how cartels work. You get it? Just because Antifa is really bad at what they do doesn't mean that they're any less of a terror group or, in a sense. Each individual cell and organization. But I do want to point out, they're actually not as bad as some people would think. What Antifa is doing right now and what you're seeing is called death by 1,000 cuts. They do very low tier acts of terror in order to win in the long term. It works. That's what's scary. And fighting it is very, very difficult. The easiest way to explain the power of death by 1,000 cuts is that Antifa will show up with a baton, not likely to really end anyone's life, but nobody wants to get hit by a baton. So when you see all these people show up and you know what they're willing to do, you bend the knee. I'll give you an example. I put on an event last year. It was a theater where we were going to be doing an event called something like Ending Racism, Violence, and Authoritarianism. We had an eclectic group of speakers. The headliner was Daryl Davis, a renowned anti-racist who de-radicalizes white supremacists. Antifa threatened to burn the theater down. Would they actually do it? I don't know. But it didn't matter. The theater owner immediately canceled the contract in violation, like basically just breached the contract, and then we had to decide whether or not we wanted to go after a lawsuit, and we ended up losing a lot of money over it. Nah. We had backup plans. The event went off without a hitch. We had to move. That's because people like me and the people involved are resilient, and we refuse to allow terrorists to shut us down. But this theater owner bent over immediately due to a threat of terrorism. These are people who called the theater and said, I do not like the political message being brought to this theater. And they apparently threatened to burn it down. Now, the reason I say apparently too, and I want to be careful, is I don't know what they told the guy, but that's what he said apparently. And then the police said it. And that was the threat that went around. And he immediately shut everything down. That's death by 1,000 cuts. Target low-level events. Don't allow people to unify. Don't allow Americans to actually get their footing. The goal of this event was to have libertarians, conservatives, liberals, progressives sit down and talk to each other. And that would de-radicalize and de-escalate. But Antifa wants the escalation because they need a reason to actually break things down. These Black Lives Matter protests have been a godsend. It provides them cover to engage in overt acts of terror. And all of a sudden, all of these companies across the country bend the knee. It's what they want. Now, let me address this about the base. They've got a storefront in Brooklyn. They do trainings and meeting. All of these things are legal, which is why the U.S. government doesn't like labeling domestic groups as terrorists, because First Amendment rights to speak and self-defense and combat training are totally legal. Right. Now I want to show you their Twitter account. Take a look at this pinned tweet from the base. They said the anti-pig movement in NYC is now all the way live. We have all had enough of these pigs, all out tonight. Let's keep the pushing these swine until they permanently retreat. And they show a picture of burning vehicles. Now, I got to say, to me, it sounds like this is illegal. I'm not a prosecutor. I can't tell you, but this seems like direct incitement to acts of terror. We'll see what actually happens. Another thing you need to consider is that the FBI probably already has infiltrators in groups like this. And because they're often really bad at what they do, we don't see a whole lot done about it. But this tweet should be suspended from Twitter, right? No, come on, man. We can all see what's happening. Twitter will call out Matt Gaetz, the president. But this account with 113 retweets can be reported a million times. They don't care. They're going to let the stuff stay up. We can also see that they actively promote. Retweets are not necessarily endorsements, but I think in this regard, we know what they're saying. Antifa Sacramento, in solidarity with vandalism on the front of a building. I'm not super worried about vandalism on the front of a building, but let me tell you why this is dangerous. In this photo, you can see it says kill all pigs, right? And they wrote KKK on the door and things like that. You might say, that's just graffiti, calm down, shut up. Maybe some vandalism because the windows are broken. Or yeah, a couple of windows are broken. The issue is when you see that there was a guy in Tacoma, I believe, who showed up to an ICE facility with firebombs and a rifle. This is all strategic. One person does one extreme act, but not over the top enough to get national news for an extended period. Then when you show up in graffiti, you're reminding them of what is possible. The fear of pain is often worse than the pain itself. So this is part of their tactics of keeping things simmered down and low level enough to where people are scared and refuse to defy them, but not loud enough that it shocks the mainstream media. In fact, the mainstream media has defended them over and over again because of this tactic. It's very clever. Well, they may still be losing. According to Rasmussen Reports, this is just one poll, they say 49% say that Antifa is a terror organization. It's just Rasmussen. They tend to be favorable to the president. It doesn't mean they're wrong, but I usually prefer multiple polls. I don't know if polls are enough. What I can say is you've got to look deeper than just what you see. Right now, Andy No, journalist, is suing Rose City Antifa. The New York Times likes to prop up that silly propaganda that there's no real organization. They said nebulous group. No. Andy No is targeting a specific organization with a brand and their own merchandise called Rose City Antifa. So he is going after people. He has named them. They have finances. This will happen. And it'll be really strange for the media to now say he's suing no one. No, that's not how it works. Apparently, though, you can file suits. It allows for discovery where you can actually go after financing. This may uncover a lot of, nasty dealings between this cell. Rose City Antifa violates a lot of the rules of operational security that the far left uses, notably having a branded name and having, discernible leaders among their ranks. Because of this, they're weak. And that's why we can see they're the ones being targeted. By claiming we're not really an organization, it empowers them. It's a clever move. But never forget, they're lying to you when they say this. They have a real agenda. They are not anarchists. They are not about liberty. They are about radical authoritarianism. They will use the image of anarchy. Why? They want you to believe that if their revolution succeeds, you will be free to do anything. They talk about utopianist visions of free healthcare and school. Why? They're promising you 72 virgins in heaven. The reality is they are dangerous authoritarians. At the moment they win, they go after all of the liberal intellectuals who propped them up. We have seen it over and over again throughout history. Make no mistake, those that forget the past are doomed to repeat it. I'll leave it there. I got a couple more segments coming up in just a few minutes, and I will see you all shortly.